In today's beginner-friendly painting tutorial, I'll take you through every step of this illustrated watercolor Snapdragon. Hey friends, my name is Shayda Campbell, and around here we make art and it's fun, not scary. So today I have a really simple and easy and beautiful watercolor Snapdragon to share, and it's an illustrated watercolor piece. So we're going to start by working in this sketchbook. I'm just using the back of some paper that I messed up on, and I've got a pencil and eraser. And then I'm going to be using a brush pen, not just for the initial sketch, but actually for the watercolor portion of this. It's going to be watercolor paint with an illustrative element to it. So the brush pen is really nice because you can do these really thin lines and you can put a little extra pressure and do some larger lines, just like a paintbrush. And then we'll use tracing paper and graphite transfer paper to transfer our illustration to some watercolor paper, and I'm using hot pressed 140 pound. Okay, let's talk about how to draw the Snapdragon. We're going to go through all these supplies as we move through the project, so don't worry if you're like, what was graphite transfer paper? We will talk it out later. For now, I want to start with a guide. So just put some stems in there. Mine are always a bit angled usually, bit of a curve to them. And then at the top of the Snapdragon, we've got all these little buds. Just cover the top of that line in little pointed ovals, and then come down and place a whole bunch of circles everywhere you want a flower to sit. I've got kind of a smaller one off to the left, a couple little ovals at the top, and 2 or 3 circles along the stem. After that, you can start placing some leaves. So right off the bat, we're not worried about how do we draw the Snapdragon blossom, because it is a bit of a weird one. We're just thinking about the little buds at the top and place a circle everywhere you want a flower to sit. And then with that done, it's time to draw each blossom. Friends, you can get my Snapdragon illustration, paint it, color it, use it as a reference image. It's available for you over at patreon.com/Shayda Campbell. Sign up now to support your favorite YouTube channel and keep this content coming. It's only $2 a month or $22 for the entire year, and you get a 5-year backlog of content, worksheets, coloring pages, and extra videos. So here's how to draw the Snapdragon blossom. So within that circle, I draw kind of a rounded square at the center, and then these 4 squarish petals surrounding that middle square. The Snapdragon blossoms kind of remind me of like drawing an iris or something. So big rectangle or square, and then these funny 4 petals surrounding it. And then some of them you might want to make it look a little more angled, so you only draw 1 or 2 petals. And don't overthink it, just have fun with it. It's a bit of a weird one. Look at some photos of Snapdragons and see what you take from it. I'm just going for kind of the general shape, and I'm not overthinking it because I tend to like a very loose and free style. Not going for realism over here. So there is our initial illustration. And now we're going to grab that brush pen. I'm using an etcher brush pen, and I will link all of these supplies in the video description, as I always do, so you can shop them on Amazon, support the channel, and just generally use the same stuff that you see me using in the videos. And I'm going to go over the entire illustration. What I'm doing here is just kind of practicing using that brush pen. I'm practicing adding that little bit of pressure so that sometimes I get a thick line, and then I'm letting up on the pressure and using just the fine, delicate tip of that brush to do thinner, more delicate lines. And I'm also trying to see, okay, where does a thicker line look good? That sort of thing. I'm pulling and adding pressure on the larger stem that runs right through the middle of the flower. But other than that, where do I want a thicker line? Just play with it and see what you like and have fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is just your practice. This whole piece is really just a practice. For me, I wanted to try something a little different, kind of get back to something similar to what I used to do when I started this YouTube channel. This is very 2016, 2017 Shayda of me. So now that the illustration is complete, let's grab our tracing paper as well as a fine liner. You could use the brush pen for this, but you don't need to, since this is just the transfer image. Like, you don't really need to practice it again. You just need, your general illustration. So I just did a quick trace And tracing it allows you to keep what you like and change what you don't, if you want to move the placement of a leaf or something like that. And then I grab my watercolor paper. I taped the illustration down, grab that transfer paper, place it dark side down underneath the trace, and you're going to use a nice sharp pencil to go over the entire illustration one more time. You're very familiar with it by now. And then once you have done that, lift up the transfer and the trace, and it should look like this. Now, I decided not to transfer the one stem with the leaves. I just wanted to sketch it in, make sure I liked how it looked. And with that done, my illustration is complete. It is transferred to the watercolor paper, and it's time to paint. So grab a larger round brush for this first step. We're going to do a bit of a background. I'm using, I think, a number 12 there. And then I have my 48 pan set of Mungyo paints, 2 glasses of clean water, paper towel for blotting my brush. And I got my whole jar of brushes here, but just use whatever watercolor setup you're comfortable with, whatever set of paints you love. And we're mixing kind of a gray brown. So I used red brown with a whole lot of white and water, and then just a hint of French gray. And I've got this nice watery wash, brown, light beigey wash, and I'm just going over the illustration. I sort of am trying to avoid like where the flower is, but we're doing such a light wash. It doesn't matter if you go over it in its entirety. And I'm also going to do a little trick here. I added some more brown, darkened the wash slightly, and then I ended up taking some paper towel and just blotting, using tissue or cotton swabs or whatever to lift some of the paint is a nice way to not only make sure your wash doesn't get too dark, but it adds a little bit of texture as well. So let's let that wash dry, and while it is drying, we'll mix up some of the flower colors. I'm using a bit of red mixed with violet as well as red-brown, and lots of water, and that is going to give us a beautiful burgundy for the Snapdragon. And then I've used a bit of white mixed with some of the burgundy, and then maybe a little bit of peach or more red. So we've got a couple different colors of pink to pull from here, and I can mix them and play with them as I'm painting that flower. Having multiple colors available to you means that as you paint all these petals and blossoms, they're going to look really lively because they're not just going to be one static color. And you can play with a little bit of wet into wet and get things blooming and really make this plant look very lively. And if all that is a bit like, what? Remember, I have a beginner level watercolor e-course that's available on my website. I also have a more intermediate beyond beginner course. You can bundle them. Head over to shaydacampbell.com to check out those courses if you're, wanting a bit of further education. Going to bring in a little bit of a peachier tone here, and I'm just playing and having fun. And this really is fun because you've basically created a watercolor coloring page for yourself. You've got the illustration laid out right there, so there's nothing scary. You're just filling in with different colors of pink and peach and burgundy and letting those colors blend and play on the paper. And then once you've filled in those blossoms and the buds at the top, we're going to grab a little bit of green, and you could use just about any green you want for this. I want to go with a really warm green, so I'm using green gray mixed with a little hint of deep phthalo green and then a little bit of the burgundy as well. You put a little red in there, a little brown, and that'll just help warm up your green, kind of deaden it a little bit so that it's not so vibrant and it looks really natural. And once again, we're just going to follow the lines and the illustration that we've already laid out for ourselves. So it's very non-threatening. It's like, oh, I'm going to paint that leaf that's sitting right there. I don't have to worry. I'm not going to look at this and go, oh, why did I put that there? What was I thinking? Because I already know that I like all the placement of those leaves. I'm also doing a few little dots and lines of green in between those upper buds and those little blossoms, just to make sure that you can see some green through the flowers. That helps make this look more realistic. And I'm just using a number 8 round brush and running that belly of the brush across the page, once or twice gives a beautiful organic leaf shape, especially for those larger leaves. Our Snapdragon looks pretty good at this point, so I'm just thinking about finishing touches, like maybe a few smaller green leaves up here at the top or between the flowers. I'm going to mix a little bit of yellow ochre into my pink, get a more peachy tone, and we'll just add a few dabs of that peachier pink onto some of these blossoms. And then I'll do a similar thing with a darker green. So I'll come in and just do some little lines and splotches of darker green on those leaves. That's just going to liven them up a little bit. And then finally, I'll take a bit of that burgundy and we'll just do a few more little splotches, lines. I'm being very random about this. I just want to get a bit more contrast in my painting. And I've done that, so I'm going to let it dry. And now that it has dried, magic of YouTube, I just left for 20 minutes, made a cup of tea. I'm just going to double check. Yes, dry, good, very well. Let's do our illustration. It looks nice, but this is what I set out to do, was to add some brush pen on top of my watercolor. And I'm using the Etcher brush pen. It is waterproof and permanent, so you could actually do the illustration first if you thought that would be helpful. And I'm just going to use this brush pen to the best of my ability to do this brush pen illustration to add to this painting and make it even more interesting and add more contrast and detail. So I'm going over some of the leaves, doing a bit of a contour drawing. On other leaves, I'm just putting like a line down the center. The thing here is that you don't have to draw everything. Like, that's not the goal. Just add a line where you feel it would serve the illustration. And yeah, that's a little bit, abstract, but play, have fun. This took me about 40 minutes, so it wouldn't be crazy to paint 2 of these and maybe do a few less illustrative lines on the second one. Just see how it goes and see what you like. That's how you find your own style. Try different things and see what speaks to you, see what you really like. For me, I went over most of the blossoms here. I really went heavy on the illustration since that's kind of what I set out to do with this video, with this tutorial and this practice. And I like the way it looks. It definitely is giving Shayda 2017, and I'm not mad at that. So let's finish up, add a few more little buds here. The nice thing about illustration is that you can add things, like not everything has to be painted either. So if you want to add another leaf or 2 and they don't have any color, I think that looks really beautiful. And that's exactly what I'm doing. And yeah, now I'm done. That was a really fun project. And I didn't mention this at the start, but this was a vote for the video. So the last video of the month, you get to vote for the topic. And for August, you asked for the Snapdragon. Now, if you want to weigh in on the vote for September's video and see the whole September video schedule, head over to Patreon and become a member. You can sign up for free. You do not have to pay, although it's only $2 a month or $22 for the entire year. Thanks for watching today, friends. I will see you soon with a new tutorial. Don't forget to subscribe.